So you're looking to do illustration and comics in a digital format. Now, a lot of the digital stuff is based on what they call traditional paper, pen. It's just been adapted so that the software uses it, and the terms generally cross over from program to program. What I mean by that is sometimes you'll mention something that relates to paper and pen, and it's in the programming. A lot of times the methods that the programs use, they're different. So like if you got an iPad, you would more than likely use Procreate. Now, in that I use PC products, I use Clip Studio Paint. And Clip Studio Paint, it uses less memory and does more, in my opinion. Procreate does a lot, but I feel like it's a memory hog. Like, it moves fast and it just eats up a lot of your memory. Your file size can just go through the roof. It's insane. And when it comes to using digital, you want to make sure your file size is as low as possible. When you start out, you're really not that concerned about it. You just want to make a good product. You want something, you want a file, you want an image to look as best as you possibly can get it. To that end, time and experience has taught me that I should keep my file size low. So while I'm figuring things out and how to make things happen and look the way I need them to, I always figure out the best possible way to keep the file size lower. That being said, we're building a print together. You want to know how to make a print. Now, to save time and make it transportable, I'm going to do it digitally. The program that I'm going to use is Clip Studio Paint. Now, the OBS software that I'm using allows me to look into the camera, speak, and it also allows me to work on my graphic tablet so you can see in real time what I'm doing as I'm telling you. This here, that is a glove. It is a two-fingered glove. And when you have a tablet, say like a Surface Pro or an iPad or any variation thereof that is a transportable graphic tablet, you want to have one of these bad boys. And the reason is those touch screens are sensitive, and if you're not using your stylus and you're touching it with the back of your hand, you're going to move things all around, and it's going to become very frustrating. So the cloth separates your hand from the screen, from the touch screen, so that you can move around and not cause problems on the file that you're working on. The stylus creates the pen strokes. You use it across the screen. It does everything that the brush that you have it set on it is intended to do. Now, this large graphic tablet that I have, it is an XP Pen 22-inch high-def graphic tablet. They're relatively inexpensive. The industry standard is a Wacom tablet. It's WACOM. And they're big, and they run like champions, and they're very expensive. In that cost is a factor, I got the XP Pen because it does just about the same thing. It's just not as clunky. It's not as big. So you're essentially drawing on a monitor screen, which helps you out. So let's get in to creating this print. You want to take into account paper size, where you're going to have it printed, okay? And taking that into account, I've chosen an 11 by 17 sheet size. Standard copier paper is 8.5 by 11, and if you double that, you get 11 by 17, and that's what's called a tabloid size. I'll Now in the future, if you wanted to make your own comic, you could essentially do it on a sheet of 11 by 17 paper. You could set your pages up to be produced on 8.5 by 11, half size of an 11 by 17. You could abut your pages side by side. Over time, I can teach you how to create what's called pagination, so that when your pages on the 11 by 17 are printed, you place them in a certain order, you staple them in the middle, you fold them, and you got yourself a book. And the book runs one through whatever the last page is, and it's concurrent. It's sequential. Now, the 11 by 17 that we're going to use for this print, I already have templates. I believe they're in my comic templates. So we can look, I think, on my desktop. I thought I had templates. Do I have them in one of my other... There we go, templates folder. Yep. Okay, so printed material. Templates. T-shirt, is that a print template? Alright, here's what we're going to do. We're going to use the comic pages that I have set up. Those are on my Dropbox folder, in my Danger Team production folder. This is my template that I've created, or that I've adjusted. Now, this artboard, that's the white area, that's where you'll be working. The artboard is set up 11 inches across by 17 inches down. And the reason for that is that that's the size of tabloid sheet of paper. Now, you'll see those pink guides along the edges right here. I have those set at 1/4 inch, not a quarter, I think it's an 1/8 of an inch. 1/8 of an inch, either side, top and bottom. The reason for that is that originally, when things were printed, rollers would have to push them through the printer, and that was the width of the roller. And you didn't want to print on the outside because it would move the paper and it would smudge the ink that's been printed before it dries, and it would just wind up looking really gnarly. And you never know if a printer prints sideways or landscape or portrait, which is portrait is short to long, and landscape is long to short. And it's a photography term, is what it is. Most landscapes are spread out; they're against the horizon, and then portraits are up to down, not left to right. So figuring that in the future I might make landscape style prints, put the guides all the way around so that the rollers can roll and they're not gonna catch the paper. Now this here, I have a bunch of different layers because you work on this in layers. It's like tracing paper. You do something on a sheet of tracing paper, you throw another one over it, you get tighter, and then everything is separated. But right before you go to send it to print, you merge the layers together, the visible layers, and then you get your print. And then you save it out in the format that the printer needs, and you send it off to print. Now, the settings that I have for this file, where are the settings? Are they down at the bottom? No, they're in the... recent saved. See, I normally don't normally come into this side. I'm usually on the other, like in some of the other drop-down menus. We'll check preferences. Okay. So now for tools, canvas, display quality, file details. color conversion. Okay, I'm gonna waste too much time. Okay, I have this set up in an RGB format. The RGB is the same colors that are used in the pixels of a monitor. And there's a reason why my templates are set up in RGB format. The color looks a little bit more dynamic, and I'm looking at it on a monitor. And once that's done, I save it out and it gets printed. In the old days, back when I was younger, they used to do something called a 4-plate process. It was CMYK: cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. And each of your colors would be based on mixed percentages of those plates. They used to be engraved using acid into copper plates, and you would print them one at a time and then merge them together, and they would go onto the page. Long, tedious process, but that's what they did. Now, sometimes they didn't line up, and you would have what's called a plate shift. It wouldn't line up where the blacks were, so you'd get like a white edge, and the blacks being the ink, like the black lines you use. And maybe you'd see like cyan off to the left, and all the other colors are there. You see it in older comic books. And some people, they do it specifically to recreate that, to get, so you get that feel that it's classic, and it's been done in the 4-plate process. With this one here, what we did was I had it set up in a certain way, RGB color, 400 DPI, because anywhere from 400 to 600 is what they decide, what they say is very high resolution. That's when you go to print. After 400, in my experience, I find that it doesn't matter. The resolution's still going to look good unless you go in with a microscope, not a microscope, Sherlock Holmes, magnifying glass. Unless you go in with a magnifying glass or an industry-specific thing called a loop. Now, a loop is actually a magnifying glass, but it's really high-powered, and it's on a little stand, and it hovers over the page. You put it in the area, and you use it to look at the print quality. You can see the DPIs. You can see how they're separated, whether or not everything lined up. You get to see if any of the colors are off. But that is really, really like heady production stuff that's beyond what we're teaching here, or what I'm trying to show you here. So for this 11 by 17, 400 DPI, I have it set to RGB. That allows me to use the palette of colors that I have on the right of the screen. Boop, boop. There we go. See it? There we go. Those are all RGB colors, and they're a collected palette of colors that I've kept. They have certain hues and tints and values, and I have a whole section of this which is skin tones, and you'll see there's a lot of colors here, and I don't expect that you'll have your own like this right away. I can share this with you if you need me to. However, this is over the years I've collected things, and you can actually go online and find your own color palettes. Like if you Google them, you just look up color palettes for this, color palettes for video games, color palettes for photography, color palettes for this specific subject, and you should get a couple of different results. And if you need help with that, I'd be more than willing to help you. So now that we have this print set up, I'm going to add a layer. Now this layer, I'm going to call it sketch layer. And what I like to do is I like to lower the opacity, because anytime you bring a layer in, it's at 100% opacity. And sometimes that can be a little bit of a problem because you're trying to see through things, and you just don't want that. You don't want to have everything at 100 because it just covers up. Like, you can't see my hand behind the hand in front of it. But if we lower the opacity, you can see it. It's almost like you're spreading the fingers and causing it to be see-through. And I apologize if I'm teaching you something that you already know, but I'm just trying to introduce you to the concepts so you can wrap your head around it while you're doing it later, while you're looking at things and trying to figure out how to problem solve on the fly. So this sketch layer, I'm going to lower it to like 40% opacity, because we're going to draw on it with a blue. This looks like a denim blue. And we're going to use the brush that I normally use, which is called Lando Calibrushing. It works like a cross between a sable brush and a pen, but it does it digitally, and it's by far one of the best brushes, one of the best digital brushes I've found in order to do this stuff. Now, sometimes what I like to do is I like to add a palette and make a swatch palette. That way I know which colors I'm using, because sometimes you bounce around so much with the colors that that you forget which ones you're using. You got to select colors, and you only get like two. You get a foreground and a background when you're down here drawing. So sometimes it helps to have other ones, you know? You're like, I gotta use this. I'll teach you that in a moment. Now what I just did was I used a select tool called the lasso tool. It brings up what's called marching ants, which is that dotted line that moves. And I'm on the swatches palette, which I misspelled apparently. S-W-A-T-C-H-E. Yes, there we go. Now, the reason why I'm going to do this is because on my sketch layer, I'm going to use a few different colors, because I'm going to use guides to show you what it is I'm looking to do. I get it. This is a lot of information, okay? So I encourage you, if this gets to be overwhelming with what I'm telling you, pause it. Pause the video, take a couple deep breaths, try to focus on what it is I'm telling you, process it, and then play. And I'm by no means trying to be demeaning. I'm trying to help you. I know that sometimes too much information can be a little overwhelming. And I definitely want to help you, but at the same time, I don't want to overwhelm you. So feel free to go back, pause, oh, what did he just say? What was he talking about? Pause it, go back. Or, oh man, this is a lot. I can't deal with this right now. I'm going to pause it and I'm going to come back to it. Okay? So the lasso tool allows me to select an area of something that I'm looking to edit or manipulate. In this case, I'm just looking to fill it with a swatch color so that I can use it later in order to draw a guide. Okay, and we need another one. Where are my greens at? Let's go with dark green. You'll see why I'm using these darker colors. The reason why I use the darker colors is when we draw on the sketch layer where we've lowered the opacity, those darker colors are going to come in brighter because you've lowered the opacity. You've made them transparent or translucent so you see through them. You'll see in just a moment, okay? So now that we have our swatches set up for our guides, we're going to take a couple swipes at this. We're going to do what are called roughs or thumbnails. Now, you asked me, or you said that you wanted to use Papyrus from Undertale and Skeletor from Masters of the Universe from He-Man. I'm really tired, so I'm sorry if I space out a little bit. Now, if they're fighting, I've never seen Papyrus fight. I know of Undertale, but I haven't watched Undertale. I haven't played it. I don't know how he fights. So this requires that we do a little bit of research. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to the OBS software and I'm going to pause, and this is where I'm going to do my research. So now's a good time for you to pause the video, go to the bathroom, get a sandwich, listen to some music, whatever you want to do to just kind of unwind. I'm going to do my research, and when I unpause, what you're going to see is that I have a bunch of research material on this page, okay? Because we can't go in the gray area on the paste board. We have to be on the art board. In other products, like Adobe products, you can work in the margins, in the paste board. You can't work in the art board, but Clip Studio, you got to do it on the art board. You take the good with the bad. So let me pause this and let me do some research on Papyrus, because I know Skeletor. I know how Skeletor fights. I just need to see how Papyrus fights so that I can plan this. All right, give me a moment.